All right, good evening, everyone. Tonight is April 21st, 2026. This is the Upper Dublin School District Finance Committee. I will call the meeting to order. We have a long agenda tonight, and so we'll dive right in. Up first, we have our team here to give us an update on the Jarretttown Elementary project.
All right, thank you, everyone. My name is Ryan Murphy. I'm with ICS, the program manager. I'm joined here with Emily. She's with Alloy 5, our architect on the project. So we have a very exciting update for you today if we want to go through the agenda. So we're going to have some views to show you. Just one thing to keep in mind, these views look very finalized. The advancements in technology allow us to give a very lifelike image of the building. This design is not final. We are still working through a lot of the aspects here. So I think these images will help you all get a feel of what this building can look like, but it's important to remember that although they will look very final, that they are not final. We are still through the design process. So we're going to go through a bunch of those views, exterior and interior, and we'll walk through some of the next steps that we upcome in the next few months. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Emily, and she can help walk you through this exciting.
Thank you. Again, I'm Emily Liuzzo with Alloy 5. If we want to flip to the next. So this is our positioning of the new proposed building on the site. It kind of sits in the north corner of the site, much further back from the main road. And then you can see that view in the next slide. So from the main road, you can see kind of how far that building sets back. We are proposing the same driveway entrances, but we have the separate parent and bus drop-off configuration. And then if you go to the next one, we get a little bit closer to the building and you can start to visualize the materials we're looking at. So looking to kind of reflect what the rest of your school district has done with some brick and other accent materials throughout. Again, none of this has been completely finalized yet, but just kind of keeping a traditional look on the exterior with at least some masonry and most likely some metal panel throughout. This is from the bus loop side, so you can see kind of the parent loop side on the right there. And then if you want to flip to the next one, we're standing now in like the parent loop side and the parking lot. So you can see a little bit more clearly of kind of the vision for that material. On the facade, there's an accent out front with the brick in the back and then some sort of metal panel and kind of playing with some accents throughout for the windows. The next two are just the floor plans for reference. So you'll see in the bottom left of each of these views that we're about to walk through, we have taken basically a visual cone of the floor plan, kind of where you're looking and what you're seeing. So we can flip back to these if we need to, just to kind of get you an idea. The next view is going to be in this is the second floor. So we have the first floor and second floor. I believe most of our views are all from that first floor. The first exterior view here is the courtyard. Our courtyard is something to note is our courtyard is not completely enclosed. It is enclosed by a fence, but it is not enclosed by building. So you can get to it from the exterior. We are just calling it a courtyard because we will have it enclosed to kind of contain the students behind a secure gate and fence. And then if you want to go to the next slide. So this is how you are accessing the entire building. So this is our main vestibule. Admin is directly to the right, and then the cafeteria is directly to the left. Down the hallway, all of kind of the main community, I'll call it, program is on the left side. So you have the cafeteria, the gym, and then the media center. And then on the right side is where you access the academic wings. This is, again, for visuals, but we plan on adding, some more warmth and some branding from Upper Dublin into this school to make it feel a little more like an elementary school. But this is kind of our base for starting, so everybody has an idea of generic finishes that are going in, and then we will kind of add to it from there to make it, again, feel a little bit more like an elementary. So here you're kind of standing outside the gym, looking out towards what we're calling the collaboration space. It's a larger, flexible space that has full view of the courtyard. And then the stair to the right there is going directly up to the second floor to access the 2 academic wings on the second floor. So this is the layout of a typical classroom, and you'll be able to see in the renderings kind of what the casework and the furniture looks like. This is showing a kindergarten or first grade classroom, which those have the individual toilet rooms in them. The second through fifth do not have the individual toilet rooms in. So in that case, that space will be either a storage room accessed from the corridor or a bathroom accessed from the corridor. If you want to go to the next slide. This is a typical special education room. So this would be like a learning support space, not a life skills. We know those are specialty spaces, but this is going to typically act as all of your learning support spaces. Again, a very similar furniture layout and casework layout. The only thing that varies here is that we are not showing individual cubbies. That is because these learning support spaces are really these pull-out spaces. They are not these students' home base. And then here you can see what that all starts to look like. So the cubbies there, this is showing a first grade classroom. So you can see the cubbies there to the left. We've kind of maxed out the storage in this space. We know there's science kits to store. We know there's lots of classroom libraries in elementary schools. And then we've also added some upper cabinets with closed doors to kind of contain some of the clutter. You can see the teaching wall is on your left, kind of directly as you walk into the classroom, and that is typical for all of the classrooms in this building. So your main teaching wall is the first thing you see, and then there is a secondary teaching wall because of our classroom layout. So we got another marker board and some tack space, but the main smartboard or whatever the technology will be at the time of the building opening will live on that main teaching wall. And then this is just another view of the classroom, so you can start to see the furniture in this new space. And then the next one.
And Emily,
that
furniture, just so the board knows, is the new furniture that's in the classroom. So you're seeing what the new order was, just what it will look like in the new spaces.
Thank you. All right, this is really hard to read. I'm going to get a little closer. No, you're good. So we're looking at a floor plan for the gymnasium right now. Something to note about the gymnasium space is that we have the platform, which is semi-synonymous for stage. We're not calling it that because that has code implications, but it is a performance space that lives beyond an acoustic partition wall. So that can be fully separated from the gymnasium. It can be fully separated from the gym for a classroom purpose. So really this has become a flexible music space as well, and then it can open up only in an event of performances. What else is labeled on here? We have the partition, the folding partition to divide the gym in half as well. And then the basketball hoops, and something you really cannot see at all in this TV, and I apologize, is that for a performance, we can fit about 420 folding chairs. So it holds a decent amount of people for a performance space. And then in the next two views, you'll be able to see this as a gym. So again, the scoreboard, you can see the platform in the background there, but again, fully separated. And then the next view kind of shows this exact space as it would be used for a performance. This is the cafeteria. So again, with the cafeteria, it's kind of as soon as you walk in, it has an exterior exit out of it. This seats about 192 students with the table configurations that we currently show. You'll see we've added some things so that the space can be used flexibly, like a projector screen and some tack surface on the wall. Something else to note here is that we've added what we're calling a hand washing station. So in the north of that plan there, you can see basically a little recess in the wall, and that will house sinks for students who are coming in from recess to be able to wash hands. We have coat hooks. They can hang up, any coats or anything that they are bringing with them from recess to kind of keep them out of the cafeteria, out of the zones of travel, and then be able to wash hands and then either join the line for lunches or sit at a table in the cafeteria. And then this is just an idea of what that space would look like. So it's, mostly a big open space. There are windows, lots of natural light, and then we have acoustic panels to just kind of help with some of that sound in this space.
All right, so just to walk you guys through some of the next steps we have in the process, we do have the Planning Commission meeting tonight, so that is part of just scheduling fun. So we will actually be going over there later today to present our first pass at that Planning Commission. We are not asking for a vote at this Planning Commission. It is just to have discussion with the township. So what you saw there was a lot of the design development phase of the project. So like we talked about schematic design, we built the boxes that each of these programs go in. What you just saw was that design development. So now we're filling up those boxes. We're putting in the storage, the teaching walls, the space for students. So that was a lot of what we've done in that design development phase. And then we're now going to kind of proceed into the construction document phase, which is where you get the nitty-gritty details of what it takes to build that building. So things we have coming up, we do have that updated estimate coming up. So we have the design development documents. We're doing that updated estimate based on the documents and kind of what you saw here today so that we can give you an accurate budget forecast, hopefully coming up in one of our next meetings here. I believe we'll have another round of user group meetings with the teachers a little ways out, but we will have that third pass of user group meetings with the teachers to get their feedback, walk them through a rendered space, because a lot of what they saw was the floor plan, but now we've got kind of a little rendering that'll help them really get the feel of the space and help get any comments we had there. And again, just sharing our milestone schedule here. Nothing has changed from our last meeting here. We're just advancing a little further on. Again, we're right in the meat of that land development phase, so we're going to have a lot of township meetings coming up. We have the Montgomery County Conservation District is reviewing our drawings. When it comes to the traffic, PennDOT is currently reviewing our drawings. As of right now, their review per their website will be back to us on the 5th. And once we get that, we'll continue to work with the township on any of those traffic discussions that we had in a previous board meeting. But overall, the timeline still remains the same. We still plan to start construction around the new year of 2027. And then that will go until June of 29, where we then phase over to the move and demo of the existing building and the site work. And as always, communication steps. We do have that online area where you can get updates on the project, including these presentations. So if I know this might have been a little small, but if you go on that website, that will have this presentation so that you'll be able to maybe take a closer look at some of the images we shared here today. And that is all we had for you today. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions from the board.
All right, thank you to you both. Let's start with the committee. Any comments or questions? Go ahead.
So are we still working on kind of, and again, I get these are all very tentative renderings, what I think we're calling it the media center, but what the library is going to look like, that sort of thing. We'll see those in later phases. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So this is not the last set of views that you guys will see. This is the first pass. So what we did was a lot of the spaces that we had a lot more finalized are what you saw here today. The library, we got some good feedback from the teachers and end users that we wanted to make some modifications before we showed that, because we don't want to get their feedback and then show something that we didn't talk about there. So we wanted to make sure we're being cognizant of where we heard them. we're making some changes based on that, and then we'll share that once it's the layout's a little more final.
Totally fair. Yeah, and my knee-jerk observation, I think you already kind of spoke to earlier, which was it is very reminiscent, particularly of the middle school, but it didn't have that kind of warm elementary feeling. So I feel better knowing that you guys recognize that as well, and we're going to do whatever you do to kind of elementary it up. So yeah, it looks very similar to the middle school, which is great for middle school, but yeah, not the same for elementary. So
Well, and if I could add, Mrs. Evans, so one of the things, and we actually asked them to take them out of the renderings right now, we are working on, and one of the agenda items later will be the logo for Jarretttown. And so we are working on what's called wayfinding, what that will look like in the building to help students understand I follow the red line or whatever that may be. We talked about dragon pieces, dragon footprint, like we're still through all that to make it elementary-ish. So that is coming. We just weren't ready with that yet.
Anyone else on the committee first? Mary Beth.
I realize it's probably a later stage, but like, what do you foresee in terms of seating in the gymnasium, like for sporting events? And then my other question was the special ed renderings showed 24 desks. That's like a maximum of 15, I think, in Pennsylvania with the Pennsylvania school code, unless you have 2 teachers in the room.
Yeah,
So are those rooms bigger than they need to be?
No, so a lot of that desk was really just to show the space, that it's an equal space of a typical classroom. I know when we do the final furniture layout, we'll have fewer desks. A lot of that was to show the comparison of the typical general education classrooms versus the learning support is the one you saw today. Just to show that there's similar size classrooms. Obviously, when we get into the actual function of the space, we'll furnish it appropriately for the amount of students we have in the classroom. But that was really meant to show that the 2 rooms are about the same size. We didn't want it to look, if we only put 2 or 3 desk clumps in there, that it was smaller than the other rooms. We didn't want to give that impression.
We are not anticipating that a learning support classroom will have 24 students in it at one time. So we did talk about that. The rendering shows more than what we need, but I think the point was to show you the rooms are about the same size, that should we ever need to swap things out in the future or we need to have more desks in there, we have the space to be able to do that. I do also want to point out that the one that they show is not a standard learning support because it has a bathroom in it. So that happens to be the learning support in the K1 hallway. Since those classrooms have bathrooms, we kept one in the learning support, but the learning support classrooms in 2, 3, 4, 5 do not have a bathroom in them. They match the gen ed classrooms there.
Are there any self-contained older classrooms that may benefit from having a?
The life skills classroom has a bathroom built into it as well. And then the gym piece that you mentioned, if you're talking about bleachers or so forth in there, we have not included that in the design plans to this point. We have calculated how many seats we could put in there for a performance, but we haven't built in bleachers yet.
Correct.
I know the gym is a little smaller than the Maple Glen gym, which has maybe 2 levels of 2 bleacher rows.
Yep.
And like that fills up for some of the events, and there's no room for seating on the opposite side of the gym, so that might help gauge how much seating, would be needed, or, if it's folding chairs, making sure that it's deep enough to hold, the whole crowd there. And then square footage wise, what is the capacity of the standard classrooms in terms of kids? I think it's like 28 square feet per student.
I know right now, I think the maximum that the state allows is, I believe it's 25 students. Is that correct? 25?
No, it can go much bigger.
Yeah, now our square footage for the classrooms is a little over 900 square feet for classrooms, so it is very comparable to the other classrooms that you have across the other 3 elementary schools, not counting existing Jarretttown. It is comparable to that one too, but obviously we're planning for the future. But it is around the same size as your other classrooms across the district.
Thank you.
And just for comparison purposes, yes, the gym is almost double, or is double, of what the existing Jarretttown is. You're right, it's less than Maple Glen, but it is significantly larger than Fort and Thomas Fitz as well.
Just to follow up, just to be clear, is it the plan though to put bleachers in it? We just haven't gotten there yet?
At this time, I don't know that it is. We are at the point of value engineering and figuring out what we think we can fit into the spaces. So I don't know if that's on the list for value engineering, but right now we do not have bleachers included in the cost projection or in the design.
That is correct, and that brings a good point to the value engineering process. When we do the value engineering process, it isn't only deducts, it's adds. So, hey, what's the cost to add bleachers to this project? Okay, if we want to do that, what do we need to remove from the project to stay on budget? So that's a big part of what we do with the value engineering is we take a bunch of ideas of things we can either ramp up or ramp down and compare the cost versus benefit ratio of them. So we then say, okay, if we want to do this, we need to pick one of these three to remove. And that's kind of the process we're getting into right after DD. So that will be one of them. I know that was a big comment from the community to look at having those bleachers there, or at least relay what that cost would be to the project.
Yeah, I think I can telegraph. I don't want to speak for you, Mary Beth, but I'm going to guess you and I feel the same, which is that's definitely something we should look heavily at, but we're not there yet. We get there next, and then we'll talk about, puts and takes, but yeah, just putting a plug in for that now.
All right, anyone else on the board have comments? Joe?
Yeah, I would add a third voice to considering the bleachers, especially maybe on the left side of that drawing. If that's an exterior wall, that might be a space where they can go, understanding that it will potentially cost extra and something may have to be given up. But I think it's important for the community to consider having that spectator space there for athletic events. Also, you had mentioned the courtyard fence. Is that going to be, I think that's slide 9 maybe, if you need to pull the slide back up. Is that the idea that that's going to be even with the edge of the wings as far out as they extend and there's going to be fencing
Correct.
there? Okay.
Yeah. That'll be, there'll be a push bar to get out, but there won't be a way to there'll be a keypad or swipe to get in, but not it wouldn't be a public access to get in.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. I just want to acknowledge it's just remarkable what's possible with renderings, early rendering at this point. And as a reminder for everyone, I know you said it, but these renderings are early. It is not complete as they look. Normally, you don't see renderings, and historically, you don't see renderings like this until you're very close to the end. So
it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. So I want to echo that comment. Thank you very much for the presentation. I don't think we have any items regarding this presentation coming up. Thank you for representing us at the upcoming township meeting tonight, and I know we have some representatives going from this meeting there as well. Any last things before I let them go? All right. Thank you very much. All right, we'll dive into our regular meeting items. Any announcements tonight?
I do not have any announcements.
All right, we do have minutes from our March 18th meeting. We've all had the chance to review those. Any comments on the minutes? Are we prepared to accept those minutes?
Yes.
Yes. All right, thank you. And we'll dive into our reports and recommendations. Are we doing all three of these at once, or how do you want to handle that?
I think it makes sense to handle them all at once. I'm going to kick off the Giza Amendment 3, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lester, and he's going to walk through the details of each of the projects here. But yes, I think it makes sense, Mr. Lester, when you get started, just roll through all three of these items, and we'll take questions at the end. So all of the three projects you're going to hear about this evening, if you remember back to January, Mr. Lester and I gave a presentation on our 5-year capital projects plan, about the projects we have planned to do over the next couple of years and what's recommended. We also talked very specifically about what we were looking to get done this summer. So all three of these projects are projects that we are looking to get done this summer. It was part of our plan. We're just really putting that into motion here this evening. The second two are pretty standard. Those are bid items. And again, Mr. Lester will cover that. The first one is related to a Giza project. So it's a recommendation to engage with CMTA. CMTA is also connected to ICS. We have been using them as our ESCO, our energy service company for Giza projects. Giza is Guaranteed Energy Savings Act. We initially engaged with CMTA back for the Fort Washington Elementary School renovation project after the tornado damage that was done there. We entered into that project as a GIZA project. It worked very well for us. It was extremely successful, and CMTA has done a number of projects since then under this GIZA agreement. So the original agreement was Fort Washington. Amendment 1 was the boiler projects at Maple Glen and Thomas Fitzwater. Amendment 2 was our Thomas Fitzwater renovation project that we just wrapped up this past summer. And again, we're looking here tonight to add on as Amendment 3 for the projects that we're looking to do this summer. As I mentioned, CMTA has been doing an excellent job for us, so that's why we're recommending to continue along for these projects. These projects are specifically eligible for a GIZA project because they achieve long-term cost savings through energy cost reduction and operations and maintenance cost reduction. So that's what makes them eligible to continue to utilize our GIZA projects. So Mr. Lester, I'll turn it over to you. You can start with Amendment 3 and then cover the other 2 bid items.
Yes, on Amendment 3, we have 2 specific projects. The one is replacement of controls for Maple Glen Elementary School. That is all the automatic controls for temperature controls on our ventilation system in A wing. Those rooms have not been updated. There have been upgrades in other parts of the building. This section has not. And the air handler D1 that serves that area. Again, it still has the original controls. And the reason we're pushing this now is we're really losing automatic function of these systems. It's basically, we have 26-year-old computers attached to each piece of equipment. And we're finding this past season that we've really had to do more manual control. It's not operating automatically the way it should anymore, and all the equipment is obsolete. So that first portion would be replacing all those controllers on the existing equipment. The second part of the project was the gymnasium at the high school. The lighting, the T5 lamps, the parts are just obsolete since everything's switching to LED. So it would be replacing all the lights in the gymnasium with LED lights. It would almost be a 1-for-1 replacement. Lighting levels be slightly better than they are currently. Much more output from the LEDs, more efficient operations of the system with a lot less maintenance for us. Instead of putting plywood down on the floor every summer and going to each fixture and changing lamps into something burns out in between, kind of being stuck. These LED lamps will go in, they're good for 100,000 hours operation. So that's what the portions of the GIZA Amendment 3 are. And the other 2 bid documents, again, are items that we've discussed. Again, at Maple Glen Elementary, we have a large number of the storefront windows, and that's really the windows in the public areas, especially where the sun hits in the back. A lot of UV degradation of the actual seals on the windows, so we're getting moisture trapped in between the windows or foggy. So this is a bid package that we would like to advertise to have all those systems replaced. Any system that is bad or anything that was identified by the architect as potentially failing soon would be included into this bid package. And the second bid package that we're looking at was also at Maple Glen. Underneath the windows, the exterior window, classroom windows, it was built with a glazed ceramic tile on the outside of the building. There's been a problem between expansion and water getting behind them, just the nature of the tile and the grout, that those tiles are cracking and popping off. This project is to bid out to remove all the damaged tile and put a different type of coating with expansion joints into this window system. So wanted it to be more appealing to look at, but it'll also last longer with less maintenance.
All right, comments or questions from the committee? I have a couple. One, so first of all, the 2 bids, they're completely separate projects?
Yes, completely separate projects,
Okay.
different contractors. So we'll be having, we have 2 separate bid advertisements and 2 separate bid meetings for any potential contractors.
All right, and for the GIZA projects, you covered without, I understand there aren't the details, but we expect savings from maintenance efforts and things like that. But because it's GIZA, there's part of the reason it qualifies for GIZA is because we expect savings on the energy side. Do we have quantifications of that yet or not? I know we need it eventually.
We have it in the full document, but again, so a lot of that is related to the cost of the project. The cost of the project factors into those savings. So again, I don't know that there's a significant amount of ongoing savings that's going to generate savings from our budget, as an example,
That's
from
where I was
reduced
going.
energy costs.
Yeah.
There's small costs there, but the largest cost is the ongoing maintenance of this if we don't do this work.
Right,
So.
okay. Yeah, and I understood that for the cost of the project, the idea is that the energy savings offset the cost of the project. That's the entire premise of Giza. All right, anyone else have comments? Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Lester. Thinking about my LED lights at home that never last as long as they're supposed to last. I know this is completely different, but if the lights don't last 100,000 hours, is there some sort of prorated warranty replacement for those?
There is warranty on these. I have to look at the actual specifics.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
I think we talked about at a prior meeting that one of the things, if it's doable, is to have a dimming capability because the gym gets used for post-prom and maybe other things that you don't want, kind of maximum. Is that doable with this setup?
The fixtures themselves are built with a capacity to dim. Unfortunately, our wiring isn't there to do this. It's not as your home dimmer on the wall where you're controlling a voltage difference. This is actually a separate low voltage control wiring system where each fixture would have to get wired, and you send a signal to the driver and telling it whether to increase or decrease. So they're capable, but we don't have it built into this project because it would be an additional project of bringing that low voltage wiring into the gymnasium and to each fixture.
Jeff?
Bob, quick question on the Maple Glen exterior repairs. We're targeting, if the bids come in, to do both of those this summer, correct?
That is correct.
Is there any overlap in areas, meaning is the masonry around the windows, meaning does that have to be staggered or coordinated, or how are we going to handle like that, if that makes sense?
There's very few windows around the masonry. The majority of our windows are in our vestibules that are failing the door glass and what we call the storefront, not a classroom operable window, but it's kind of a fixed store, aluminum storefront. That's what seems to be where the majority of the problem is. There's a handful of windows, but that won't interfere with any of the masonry operations.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
The only thing I'll add here, just to make sure, the bids do not need to be formally moved forward to the legislative agenda. So again, we're just reviewing that with you to make sure the committee is good with us releasing them. We would bring that back then to the May committee after we receive the bids for formal approval. Item A is entering into an agreement with CMTA, so that's what would need to move forward if the committee's in agreement.
Let's start with that. Everyone okay with moving item A forward to the legislative? Yes. All right. And we didn't hear any comments about the bids, but last chance if anyone wants to add anything before the bids are released. Okay. We have another bid for food service equipment. Kristen Deli is here to share that one with us.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. Tonight, because I'll be asking for a recommendation to move the approval of a large invitation for bid to the legislative meeting, I'd like to begin the level set about the food service department and our financial management. Yeah, I did it. I finally did it. Okay, so again, the level set of how our department operates, we're really a unique center in the district because we follow the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, National School Lunch and Program and School Breakfast Program guidelines and legislation, which really outlines and sets requirements for meeting federal nutrition standards, but also program compliance and operating standards, including our financial management. And so our department operates a nonprofit school food service account, and we call that NSFS. And all food service operations conducted by our department are principally for the benefit of school children, and all the revenue from which is solely for the operation or improvement of food services. And this includes any reimbursements that we get, any catering revenues, including such as the Head Start agreement that we have. So any revenues that come into our department whatsoever. I think it's really important to note that the NSFS account is completely separate from the general fund. Our department is self-operated and self-sustaining, and funding does not come from the general fund outside of the annual required debt restoration for negative balances. I want to move on pretty quickly to, hold on, let's see if I can do it again. Yay, might as well. Thank you. So principally where we generate our revenue to operate our department is through reimbursements per meal that we serve, and that's the lunch and breakfast. And so I wanted to include this slide to demonstrate the number of meals that we're serving and the differences in reimbursements that we get per meal. I also want to, we have breakfast reimbursements come from the federal, state, the families and homes of our students, department contributions, and ultimately, this is the same for lunch and for breakfast. However, what we're actually contributing and receiving, it differs. Remember, Pennsylvania, it's codified that we are a free breakfast participating Commonwealth. So the state, you'll see, supplements the portion that brings the meal coverage to $247, which is what the federal reimbursement for a breakfast is at the paid rate. For our lunch programs, you'll see that federal covers some money for no matter if a student is paid, reduced, or qualifies for the free meals program. The federal, state reimbursements come in through each student. Additionally, for lunch, we have a home contribution that is not covered by the state because we do not have universal free lunch in Pennsylvania. In order for we reinvest some of our revenues into students and families who are at the paid level to offset the cost in order to level set the meal coverage for each of the meals served. So that's one way that we're contributing or recirculating the money back into the food service account. I'll talk briefly about our net position because I want to assure you that we are in a good position to start really ticking off some of our capital equipment objectives. Thank you. Okay, so this is, at this point now, an 11-year look back, and the information that we have for 25-26 is as of March, and we are in a decent net position in order to really start continuing our capital improvement plan. Again, this is any improvements and all asks are items that my department can sustain and has planned for over the next 5 years. Last year, just a reminder, we really focused on some of the equipment at Fort Washington. We did a renovation of the entire serving line. And this year, we're really focusing on equalizing cooking equipment and Thomas Fitzwater. So before I get too far into that, let me talk to you about the equipment IFB that we published in order to start executing some of our goals. We don't really have a lot of opportunities for savings independently, and we've learned from as working as the lead agent for the grocery bid that really volume and collaboration amongst SFAs is really where I think that we have a unique ability. So I wrote an IFB in collaboration with PDE, where I had to vet it by PDE, Pennsylvania Department of Education. They are our governing agency when it comes to my program. And we worked with other school districts, local school districts, in order to see who all was, interested in getting what pieces of equipment so that we could really combine our volume. And Upper Dublin operated as the lead agent. We used piggybacking allowances within the contract to allow some of our partner districts to participate and add volume. What I did was execute an IFB that was going to be awarded based on category so that we could really demonstrate the volume and additionally, really administrative savings and ultimately financial savings. We also use this opportunity to really try to leverage some unique opportunities that we wouldn't see on the regular market, such as warranty clauses or training opportunities. What we're seeing now is, very specialized equipment that needs specialized training in order to do simple things like preventative maintenance. So what we did was we took our volume, combined, our ask, and said, will you train us instead of training us hiring out other folks to do this preventative maintenance work on, somewhat complex pieces of equipment. And we got a really good response on that. So hopefully we see future savings because of that as well. So again, this IFB included 9 categories, and the award for each category would go to the vendor that returned the lowest bid. In our contract, of course, no contract actually exists until a school district uses this procurement in order to issue a purchase order. I think the important part is to talk about how we will utilize this specifically at Upper Dublin School District. So the 9 categories, one award, the recommendation is to not move forward with the award of a blast chiller because it was cost prohibitive and we were not going to engage with that piece of equipment. However, regarding some of the plans for Upper Dublin School District, mostly one of the major goals of the department is to get convection ovens in each of the Fort Washington, the high school, Thomas Fitz, and Jarretttown. These are critical, essential pieces of equipment for bulk service. Our current equipment is truly at the end of its useful life. Some of our ovens extend past 25 years of service in the district. Additionally, we're really anticipating getting combi ovens and introducing that cooking system to every school within the district so that we can have very equitable cooking styles and recipes and do things that are surprisingly hard to do in our kitchens, such as even boil water. It's really difficult. We boil water in a microwave or an oven. So not really consistent with steaming or, fresh vegetable preparation. So those combi ovens are going to be something that will really modernize our spaces. Additionally, we're going to utilize this bid to put a commercial food processor to process fruits and vegetables in our kitchens, tilt skillet at the high school so that both the high school and Sandy Run have equitable cooking equipment, holding cabinets, which are essential for serving 200-300 kids at a pop. Tabling, which is, service tabling at Thomas Fitzwater. Thomas Fitzwater as well, that is one of the, our major priorities. So we're redoing the entire serving line. That serving line is at the end of its useful life. And since we're doing such a big, we were kind of waiting for all of the above ceiling work to be done so that we could really get into Fitz. So we've reimagined how the space looks, and we're going to reorganize some tabling, and we have a longer serving line, and we're hoping to additionally kind of update and modernize the walls and just the general aesthetic. As a reminder, that kitchen is just out in the hallway. There's no barrier between classrooms and the kitchen. And then little things like shelving, which are clearly essential for keeping food and equipment up off of the floor and in a safe space. And ultimately, due to the healthy net position of the department, the food service department can wholly financially support the approximate $337,000 cost of the UDSD specific updates. So if there's any questions.
Anyone starting with the committee have comments or questions? Jeff?
Kristen, thank you for that, and thank you for taking the lead in developing the IFB and and getting others to piggyback with us. The one that's not being recommended, the blast chiller, because of the cost prohibitive nature, is that something that's needed? Is there an alternative? Or if we don't go with that as part of this bid, what other options do you see, et cetera?
Sure. So the blast chiller that was specified in this procurement was well beyond what a K-12 operation would need, and the single school or the single district that requested that didn't realize it. And so there is absolutely no need for that spec. Now, if there's any future needs, that would go out in a future procurement.
Else? Mary Beth?
Going back to the net position.
Yeah.
That seems like an awful lot of money.
Yep.
Could lunch prices be reduced for the families who pay cash? Like, why are we hanging on to that much money as a nonprofit entity?
We're not hanging on to that much money. We're putting it back into our meal prices. We have something in NSLP called paid lunch equity. So there's actually an amount of money that families at the paid contribution have to pay. And our department does keep meal prices down by generating our revenues and creating new initiatives such as the Head Start program or catering, and engaging in those opportunities to offset paid family prices. Now, with that being said, a lion's share of where this revenue was generated happened during COVID and during universal school meals when everyone amply participated. And this is all part of our capital equipment plan. But as Mr. Leckman and I have gone through what our 5-year budget looks like, this money will be utilized. Our costs have gone up exponentially, especially food and equipment, even though this bid did demonstrate a little bit of stabilization based on what I saw of the line that I put on at Fort. We expect labor, feesers, all of those costs to go up. So we do plan on utilizing this and this keeping us through as we continue to engage in the capital equipment, but also through the next 5 years as well.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you for this update. We do need to approve the bid itself. So there's a bid document attached to the agenda. Are we prepared to move that forward?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Kristen. Next up, we have an agreement for cellular service, and Colleen's going to take that one.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're recommending a change to transition our district mobile services or cellular services over to AT&T FirstNet. For a little bit of background about the why, the district has experienced some consistent service challenges, specifically in 3 buildings: Jarretttown Elementary School, Sandy Run Middle School, and Maple Glen Elementary, and little pockets here at the high school. That was something that was reported to me fairly early on, and that's something that we have validated through a site survey, that there are consistent gaps in coverage. In addition, our current mobile fleet is fairly dated and due for replacement. And so we were looking for an economical way to go through and do that replacement and make sure that we have the services that our district needs. So what we did is we went through and reviewed with 3 major providers, and we are recommending AT&T FirstNet. Now, for a little bit of background about what FirstNet is, it is not regular AT&T service. The FirstNet network was created after 9/11 as a dedicated emergency network for emergency responders. Because we're considered a safety support annex, if you will, we are entitled to also be on that network. So what that means is AT&T is funded through the government to provide that network. It is segregated, so our devices would always be on that network. So the good example, and we'll talk about a positive example, is down in Philadelphia, we had a Super Bowl win several years ago, right? And everybody kind of overwhelmed those cellular towers when they were in and around for the Super Bowl parade. The police officers, medical responders, et cetera, had no problems using their cell phones because they were on FirstNet. And that's something that would be capable of us as well. So a little bit about that site analysis. I just want to circle back to that. We went through, and I took an engineer, and we went through all 3 of those sites and also walked through the high school. And we looked at how AT&T FirstNet would function. We had zero coverage problems. Their cell phones, text messages, and coverage were perfectly fine. There was a little bit of lower coverage in that front foyer area of Jarretttown, but it was by far the best service that came through. So we're looking to proceed with that recommendation. When I do a cost-benefit analysis, sometimes when you compare cell phone proposals, they're not always apples to apples. So I went through and made it as close to apples as I could. So this would be for a 36-month term. We would always have our devices refreshed at the end of that 36 months term. And over the term of 36 months, it would be an increase of costs if it's an administrative line of $8.23 over 36 months, okay, not over a year, okay? And then for a non-administrative line, it would be $2.23.
All right, comments or questions? Am I reading it right that these include devices at 99 cents?
99 cents, sir.
Okay.
And then they're also going to provide us rebate for our current devices and give us money back. The last piece I do want to mention is something that we would be doing moving forward, no matter what the provider is we will be managing centrally all of those devices with a management tool, so that if a device is lost, we can wipe it remotely to prevent or to enhance data security.
All right. John.
I also took note of the 99-cent iPhones and $0 for the wall charging blocks, by the way. You didn't say that, Mark. Colleen, thanks for this presentation. I don't have a sense of how many lines do we have? Just can you give me a sense of the context?
Yep. So if you don't, it's a little bit of a complicated answer. Currently, the way our cellular devices are established, we have some mobile hotspots in addition to cellular lines. So we're also looking at standardizing who has what and really standardizing on a mobile phone. So if we go forward with this plan, what I have is we would have a total of 81 lines. Once all is said and done, should all administrators participate. Okay, so that's the kicker is administrators would have the option of whether they choose or not choose to participate. Okay, that help?
That is, I'm asking a question you might know the answer to, but if they choose not to participate, is the cost of the cell phone on them? Do we reimburse? Okay.
No, we do not reimburse. The cost of the cell phones on them.
Excellent. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, it all sounds promising. Are we prepared to move that forward?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Thank you. We have an agreement with Alloy 5 for another, well, I'll let you, who's introducing that one?
I will take this one. So as we have been working with Alloy 5 and ICS on the Jarretttown plans, we started to talk about branding, making sure we have district colors, what are the Jarretttown colors, and then that we would like to incorporate the Jarretttown logo. And it has become, we've become aware that the logo, particularly at Jarretttown, was created a while ago, is not necessarily in a file type that is easily digitally able to be shared or colors branded or identified, like what the actual colors are with the hues and so forth. And so we would like to be able to start with Jarretttown and work with Alloy 5 to create a new Jarretttown Dragon logo with input from our faculty and students and so forth that can then be easily digitized to be able to share it on different communications and be able to incorporate into the building somewhere. So that is the bulk of what we are recommending, is working with Alloy 5 to do that work. It is a kind of a higher level of a skill set. Mrs. Yoder will be contributing to that and making sure the messaging and so forth and things align, but it does require a bit of an additional specific skill set for that. We also then, so that's the bulk of the work that you will see that we believe Mrs. Yoder has funds in her communications budget this year to cover that work. And then the remainder of the agreement is to look at the 5 other buildings. I want to be really clear, we are not changing logos. We're not asking other schools to change, but we want to make sure that there's a common thread through all of them that also when you look at it, you know it's Upper Dublin. So when you see the Fort Washington Patriot, there's also something there that clues you in that this is an Upper Dublin school. So we're not not looking to overhaul the others significantly, but just to see what can we weave together to bring some consistency to what the messaging of those looks like, that you can know that this is Upper Dublin. So that part of it would then be the second phase that would be in the 26-27 budget as part of Mrs. Yoder's budget communications. So that's what this recommendation is for. And again, was prompted really from the conversations at Jarretttown, and I believe was part of her long-term plan when she presented her communications audit to relook at them.
To clarify, you're asking the committee and eventually the board to approve effectively a 2-year agreement. Is that fair?
Yes, it is one agreement that would span over the 2 budget years, and yes, I would assume they would bill us for the first part this year and the second part next year.
Okay. Any comments or questions? Jenna?
Yeah, that's really helpful background on the Jarretttown logo in particular, because I'll admit, when I first read this, there was a part of me that was like, why are we doing logos? But yeah, I mean, I get the need for Jarretttown. So on the other buildings, and you already answered one of my questions, because I had okay, then what, right? We're going to get all these logos potentially updated. And yeah, I don't want to necessarily sign up to go changing external signage or anything. So what are we going to do then? For the other buildings, is this going to be more on, website, social media, print,
Yes, so I think even some of our other logos are not as high quality digital logos to be able to share or use on the things like you mentioned. So it would be bringing them kind of high resolution to be able to put on digital communications, websites, things like that. So I don't think you'll see major changes between what currently is and what a new piece to it might have the through line of the Upper Dublin colors somewhere or something, but digitally we'd be able to use them because the files would be more up to date.
Anyone else? Mary Beth.
More from like an emotional perspective, like trying to keep flavor of, the previous logo and maybe involving students and or the art teacher or something like that in the process, if anything's being retooled and not just digitized. So that digitized and then Upper Dublin-fied.
Yeah, I think that honestly, the bulk of the work will be the Jarretttown one. And yes, absolutely, art teachers already expressed an interest to be involved, and we can certainly include other stakeholders as appropriate. Again, I don't think we'll see significant changes to the other buildings, but trying to have a common theme that maybe can, again, go through all of them.
Anyone else? John?
I'll just say, somebody who works in this field, this is actually a really good deal for logo creation, and so we should take advantage of this. And I agree. I mean, because logos have changed over time, and if you're sending something off to print, it's a very different version of a logo than using on a website. Also, logos need to scale, so it needs to work on a desktop as well as on a mobile version, and so you need the logo to be able to expand and contract as needed. I didn't realize, but I appreciate sort of the creation of a brand family that we're looking at across all the logos. I think that's a really smart move, and so I know I'm not on the committee, but just as a board member, I support this and appreciate the work.
Anyone else? All right, we'll move this forward. Yes. Yes. All right, thank you. Where are we? Disposal of excess, obsolete, non-repairable equipment. Colleen is back with her usual long list, and there's a bunch of other stuff as well. Eventually, you'll get to the bottom of it, won't you? Any comments or questions on this? All right, we'll move this ahead. Yes, thank you. Monthly financial reports.
Yes, thank you. I will be brief on these tonight. We have a long budget presentation to get through. So just a quick update on the receipts side. Again, everything is trending in line. 89% of our budgeted receipts have been received year to date compared to 90% the prior year. Expenses are slightly below at 67% compared to 69%. But if you look back and compare to last year, we actually did our $3 million transfer to the capital reserve in March last year. So I think that's what's driving some of that. This year, we discussed holding that final recommendation for the capital reserve based on our projections through the end of the year and just making sure we're all comfortable with what that final recommendation is before we make it. So this year, that would be much closer to the June June timeframe to make that recommendation and then solidify after the completion of the audit. So everything looks good there. The other financial reports, there's nothing much to call out in those reports. I do have the updated financial projections. So we reviewed that for the first time last month. It is updated this month through March actual, the end of March, and estimates from April through the end of the year. Again, on the revenue side, revenues are trending about $800,000 better than budget. So it's about a 0.6% difference, so not much change from last month. On the expenditure side, we're trending about $2 million under budget, which is about a 1.6% under budget. But again, just to remember, that projection does include our full budgeted amount, budgeted with the reductions of the capital reserve of $2.5 million. So again, the deficit that we're showing of $638,000 includes a proposed transfer of $2.5 million to the capital reserve. So again, we have flexibility around that as we move through the end of the year. The projected deficit's up about $300,000 from last month. Again, I made very clear last month that these numbers will change. Also in prior years, we were looking at multi-million-dollar surpluses. This year, it's much closer to that $0 amount. So those changes each month are going to look bigger than they have been in prior years. But again, everything's pretty much stable at this point. Again, I note it's minor on $128 million. So $150,000 of that change was related to the other expenditure category. Again, when we discussed this last month, I said that's probably the most challenging area to make projections on, just because that includes all of the other areas of the budget that are not called out as specific line items in that projection sheet. So the one other thing that I do want to note, so last month, Ms. Evans, you asked a great question around the PSERS and the FICA delta, and we had an answer, but it wasn't a great answer. So I want to thank Ms. Baldessano. She did some work after that meeting just to look at it again. What we discussed was the PSERS and FICA line item is based on salaries, right? So you would assume salaries are under budget, PSERS and FICA would be under budget because they are a factor of it. One of the things, so FICA really doesn't matter because FICA is our Social Security. That does apply to all of our wages, except for those wages that exceed the cap within a year, which in a school district are minor. There are a couple areas that drive the PSERS amount being under budget. Last month I did mention it, right? We have a number of staff members that take the waiver for benefits, right? So anyone that takes a waiver, those wages are not PSERS eligible. There's one other area that really is a large area for PSERS. It's not eligibility. It's that when you look at our coaches and part-time staff that don't reach a level that make them eligible for PSERS service in a year, that number can be a little more significant. When you think about coaches and advisors are probably a good example of that. Coaches and advisors, those that are not district employees can opt out of PSERS, right? So when you look at coaches and advisors, we have almost $1 million that are budgeted in those categories. So we budget as if all of them will be eligible for PSERS because they could all be filled by district staff, but not all of those positions are. So that's another big reason. Part-time staff that don't reach, I did make that note, 500 hours or 80 days do not reach eligibility level for PSERS. So that's all in the budget, but not everyone is eligible or qualifies and can opt out. So that's just, hopefully that's a better answer than we were able to cover last month. So,
Comments or questions on the monthly financial reports? All right, we'll move those ahead.
Yes.
All right. Budgetary transfers.
Nothing much to cover here. Again, I will just highlight the two areas. So we have another proposed reduction from capital reserve transfer to cover incremental special education costs. So that was $50,000 this month. That will reduce that line item to $2.5 million. From last month, it was just over $2.5 million. And we're recommending a reduction to the budgetary reserve of $20,000. So there was an item with our transportation department where we had a vehicle that was in an accident in the prior year, covered by insurance. We received the insurance funds in the prior year. but the vehicle was not repaired until this year. When we had that discussion with our auditors required us to recognize the insurance refund last year, but the repairs all occurred this year. We were trying to see if we would have sufficient funds this year, within that line item to cover that expense that wasn't planned for this year. But again, we've exceeded that. So that's the recommendation to transfer the $20,000 for that. So it's not that we necessarily have more repairs this year. It was just the timing of that difference that we were required to book that revenue and expense. So any questions?
Any questions? All right, we'll move these ahead. Yes, all right, thank you. And we're on to the budget update. Oh, did I miss one?
The insurance claim.
Yes.
Yes, sorry, yes. Okay. I did miss item J. Why don't you take that one up?
Yes, very quickly. We talked last month about the ongoing insurance claim that we have here at the high school with our transformer that's being repaired. We are fully funding that out of the capital reserve fund. We did discuss that as we receive insurance funds, we would transfer that to the capital reserve to match those up. We felt like that was a cleaner way to handle it. So to date, we have received $147,118 for that claim. That is everything we've submitted to them for the new transformer that's going in, minus the $25,000 deductible. Again, we do have other expenditures that we're working with them on. So we have the initial repairs when they came in and evaluated it. We also are still evaluating the lighting repairs with Starlight in this building. So there could be more, but right now, as we receive it, we want to transfer it over to the capital reserve fund.
Comments or questions on that? We'll move that ahead?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Now we're on to the budget update.
Okay. So tonight we get to continue our discussion about our budget and how the work we're doing to proceed towards a final budget in June. So if you remember last month, on the timeline here, last month we talked about revenues in detail. Tonight we'll talk about expenditures in detail. Again, I will note that tonight's presentation is we're not going into individual line items of the budget. This is sort of summary, big picture items, what's driving our budget expenditures, where we're at overall when we compare revenues and expenses at this point in the process. But we still do have work to do. So we're still working on the budget actively. This just represents where we're at today. May would be our proposed final budget, and then in June would be a final budget. I will also note up front, included with this agenda item, and it will be posted online, we keep our budget narrative up to date. That budget narrative is a 25-page document that has a lot of details that sit behind what you're going to see tonight. So again, if you're interested in lower level of detail, there's a lot of information for you to read and check out on our budget. So these are our budget priorities. We talked about this last month. It's not changing. Again, at this point, what we do, we look at our comprehensive plan. We look at all of our revenues available. We look at all of the expenses of the district, and we make sure that we're utilizing funds as best we can to provide a high-quality K-12 education, meet all of our students' needs across the district. But we know we have to do that in a fiscally responsible way, and we also have limited resources to do that. So I think that kind of packages up when we think about the budget from an administrative standpoint. That's what we're working on here. So just the big number, we put it on the screen here. I do this every year. Where we're at is a little over $131.6 million is our total expenditure budget that we're looking at. And again, when we develop the budget, we work with all of our department directors, all of our building principals. Everyone plays a role in this process. This is not just central office developing this budget and telling everyone how to run their building. We utilize a needs-based budget. That essentially means everyone starts sort of with zero every year. We don't just add a percentage onto it. We really do look at all the details of our budget every year, and everyone's doing work here to get to this number. So again, this is a big picture number. We're going to go through some of the details as we move through the presentation here. So Upper Dublin, not unique to any other school district across the state. We are heavily reliant on people to effectively deliver instructional programs and services to our 4,000 plus students in grades K through 12 that are in our care each day that we're responsible for. So as you might imagine, when you look at the breakdown of our expenditures, the largest part of our budget is personnel. This is not new information. It's what we've seen over my time here and long before me. So approximately 72% of our budget is personnel related costs. So that's all of our salaries and wages, and it's all of our benefits associated with that. Wages are about $60 million. Benefits are about $36 million. So, $96 million go into people costs for the district. We also are required to maintain our learning environments. We have about $365 million of facilities that we need to upkeep over time. So we do that through a couple ways in the budget. We have debt service for projects that we've done in the past. We have debt service for the high school. We have debt service related to Sandy Run. But we also have been able to save proactively over time. So we have $3 million in our budget for our cap as a planned transfer to our capital reserve to continue to fund future project needs that we've been talking about here. And then all other, when we think about it, is $20 million. So that's kind of all the other stuff that makes up our budget. And I point that out specifically because it's not discretionary, right? It's not like we can go to this all other area and close gaps or reduce costs. When you look at all these areas, these are really key areas. Cyber charter school tuition, 1.1 million, special education costs, programs and services, 5+ million. There's all these things, utilities, technology, that fall into that all other bucket. So it's not just the place we can go to, to quickly save dollars. So this slide gives you a lower level detail of comparison when we compare current year budget to our draft budget for next year. And it breaks it apart into two sections. It gives you a sense of for wages and benefits where we're at. And then below the line is all of those other areas that are not wages and benefits. And you can see the top section, $95.7 million for personnel costs, which is about a $4.5 million increase year over year. And again, I try and equate things to tax increases just so we can get a sense. It's not like we need a tax increase to cover all of those dollars, but it's equivalent to a 4.9% tax increase, just the wages or personnel side of the budget. The bottom section's all other. It's decreasing by about $1.1 million. And the real reason for that, again, you'll see this noted in a couple different places, is remember this year we did the elementary furniture refresh project. That was $1.4 million that were in our budget. So that's obviously not in this version of the budget because it was a one-time project. So that's why you're seeing that large decrease. But within there, we have done a significant amount of work to look across our budgets and find areas for savings. This chart, to me, is one of the most important things that we look at. Because again, I know we're talking about a budget for 26, 27, right, next fiscal year. But this chart really gives us a sense of how we don't plan for just 1 year. We need to look at multiple years, the next 5 years or so, and really think about how the decisions that we're making today are impacting the future here. So what you see on this slide just really simply is the gray line is the revenue line. The red line is our expense line, operational expenses. And then the blue line incorporates the additional $3 million for the planned transfer to the capital reserve that ultimately becomes debt service for the Jarretttown Elementary School project. So it could be easy to look at this and say, well, yes, the red and the gray line are pretty much in line, which they are, but they're still, even though there's big numbers here, they're $1.2 million apart. When you add in that $3 million transfer, it takes us to about $4.2 million is our deficit right now. And again, I note those specifically. The blue line becomes real 3 years from now. So we've got time to work on this, but it's important for us to understand the trends and where we're at today and where this is leading so we can start taking the appropriate steps to close those gaps over time. So when you think about our, expenses are going up, what's driving that up? We've already talked about personnel costs. Personnel costs are, one of the primary drivers of our costs across the district. So we're seeing expenses over time increase at a rate of about 3%, but with any given year, we can see increases or decreases from that. As I mentioned, personnel costs make up 72% of the district expenditures, and those are increasing 4.5% from the prior year. But personnel costs, you can see if we keep trending along the same trends, current staff that are in the budget projected out for another 5 years, we're going to be at almost $107 million for personnel costs. So again, that's kind of the heavy hitter when we think about our budget. But there's other areas that are driving costs too, and I'll talk about those as we move through the presentation. So this looks at just to understand our collective bargaining agreements. When we look at, we have an agreement in place with our professional bargaining unit, UDEA, for active through the 27-28 year. You can see the percentages there that are included in those contracts. UDSD is our support staff contract. That's active through June 30, 2027. So we will start to have conversations with UDSD next year about those wages. But this slide gives you a sense of, if you look at nothing else but just the contracted increases from bargaining unit agreements, that would drive out about $2.9 million in new expenses, which is the equivalent of a 3.28% tax increase, just to fund wage increases from our bargaining unit agreement. So just something to keep in mind when we're thinking about tax increases and cost drivers. All right, and I'll stop here. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Smith to talk about enrollment and some staffing related items.
Thank you, Mr. Leckman. The next couple of slides are some really preliminary projections on what enrollment drives out with staffing and some other thoughts that we are having as we analyze our current staffing. So this first slide here is just simply looking at elementary enrollments. You can see by building each grade, we have rolled the students over and projected if they're in third grade now, that they will be in fourth grade next year. And then we look at our policy 126, our guidelines for class size, and that drives out how we kind of estimate the number of sections that we think that we will need. You'll notice for kindergarten, you see 2 rows across there. The actual number represents the number of students registered at this point in time, probably yesterday or day before as I updated these. Those numbers continue to change on a daily basis, a weekly, monthly basis as we get towards the end of the year, and even continue to change through August. And then you see a line for kindergarten projections, and we typically project that each of the buildings will be at around 80 students or drive out 4 sections. Maple Glen for the last 2 years has been lower than that and has had 3 sections of kindergarten instead of 4. We take the approach of anticipating that will increase. And so for right now, we are budgeting 4 sections of each school for kindergarten, or 16 total positions for kindergarten. At the bottom there, you'll see a difference from 25-26. Fort Washington, other than the kindergarten numbers, which impact Maple Glen, Fort Washington's losing a 5th grade class that is relatively small for them, that only had 3 sections, and will need a 4th section of 5th grade next year. It's a larger class. And so that will drive out an additional staff position. So again, when you look at overall the number of budgeted positions, we did budget this year for 16 kindergarten sections, even though we kept it at 15 then when those numbers actually finished in August. So in the budget for next year, 26-27, the elementary is driving out a +1 because of that 5th grade section at Fort Washington, because the kindergarten is already included in this budget and would roll over into next year's. So that's the elementary. The next slide shows your secondary projections. Secondary is always a little bit harder because we're not just looking at a section of students that stays together all day. Sandy Run's enrollment is relatively status quo, so their homerooms will still be projected at 12 sections per grade. And then based upon the classes that they're in, class sizes will fluctuate. Certainly, how many students are in a certain class of math or social studies will fluctuate a little bit, but you can see what we'll be averaging as class sizes. And then the high school we give you by grade, again, relatively similar to this current year. We're not anticipating any large increase. You can see somewhat of a decrease there. The high school is really driven by course requests. And so then we meet with the high school staff and we look at how many students requested each particular course to figure out how many sections of that needs to run. Sometimes it's based upon the uniqueness of the course, the equipment, so forth. Other times it's just kind of a standard number that we are looking for. So that's the initial way we start to look at staffing. And then you'll see on the next slide, another piece to staffing is then looking at What are some of our needs that we have moving into next year that we might need to consider, whether that's shifting positions or creating new or additional positions? And I have two here to throw out. We are currently, looking at what other requests we got. These two have risen to the top as the highest priority. They are both related to special education. Our autistic support, the board may remember, we added an autistic support classroom to this year. So we had 2, now we have 3 in this year, and we are anticipating the need for a 4th next school year. The 3 current classrooms that we have, they're all housed at Fort Washington currently, and their caseloads are near the maximum limits. And autistic support has a lower caseload than many, like a learning support classroom would. They are near caseloads, and we are anticipating approximately 10 early intervention students being identified and needing programming through an autistic support program. So we're currently still working through EI and making sure, are those students really planning to come to public school, or will they be staying an additional year in early EI? But we are at this point anticipating, if there's 10 of them, that's a whole new classroom. I will share this as a trend across the county. All the superintendents are talking about the need to add autistic support classrooms. So that's one that really has risen to the top and would be driven by caseload. It would also, and you'll see it on a future slide when I get to it, it would also, if we add the position of a classroom teacher, we will most likely need educational assistants to also support that program. So we're working out some of those details. Another priority that's risen to the top, and the board may remember, in this current year, we created a teacher on special assignment position somewhat, I think it was a little later after budget was done, because we were seeing an increased number of students needing a really intensive level of reading support. These are identified special education students qualifying and needing Wilson reading instruction. It takes a special certification that is not really quick to get to provide Wilson reading instruction. And this is really this year, it's at the middle school. For next year, we're going to see a significant portion still needed at the middle school, and some students at the high school needing this level of intensive support. So we see an increased need for that, and we would like to be able to continue that teacher on special assignment. Our long-term goal here is that through Tier 1 instruction changes, less students will need Wilson instruction, and that over time, we hope to see that number go down. We also hope to build capacity within our own staff. We have several that are in the process of somewhere along the line getting certification for Wilson, but again, it's a very lengthy process. An intensive kind of having to be observed for a very long period of time with a group of students as well till you get that. So we're hoping to increase our staff that are qualified to do this, while at the same time reducing the number of students that may need it over time. But right now we have this large group of students that will need it. We anticipate that for probably the next couple of years. So right now we have a teacher on special assignment, and then we have an LTS in that teacher spot. For next year, we're projecting that we would need to make this a contracted position. So those are the two rising to the top. We'll certainly provide some more information to the board in future conversations with those. The next slide then, so we look at what our enrollment drives out, we look at what our requests or our needs are, and then we also look at, this slide somewhat represents those requests and needs that I already talked about, but it also then represents if there are retirements or resignations that have occurred in any position within the professional staff that may be based upon course enrollment or requests. There is a declining enrollment, and we may not need to fill the position the exact same way that it is. It's called attrition. So if I retire and my position maybe doesn't need to be replaced exactly the same way as it is, that's a position that we can reduce from the total number. And doing it through attrition, make sure that everybody still has a position. So this chart shows that the upper elementary at Fort Washington is a +1 position. If we add the autistic support and the Wilson position, that's another 2 positions. But through attrition or programmatic changes, which will be presented at the May Education Committee through some of the curriculum review we have done, we're estimating that we may have approximately a reduction of 4 positions as we look at attrition and retirements and programmatic changes. So when you put all that together, right now we are showing that we would not be actually adding any positions to the budget purposes financially to make all of this work. In fact, I am hopeful to bring to you that there will be a reduction in overall staffing that will see a little bit of savings in the budget there's a lot of moving parts, particularly at the secondary this year. So we're working through all that to make sure we're maximizing the staff that we have and really making sure that we're meeting the needs that we have. And I just put the note on there again, if we move forward with the AS, it will most likely come with some educational assistant positions that we would need to create. And then my summary there is we don't anticipate an increase into the budget financially to make some of these shifts happen. We'll provide more to the board then in the briefing and at our retreat before we start to ask for creation of positions at a future meeting.
So a major expense reported in our benefits category then when we talk about PSERS, a factor of wages and salaries is our state retirement system. It's a mandated pension system that everyone's required, all school districts are required to participate in. So our total PSERS expense for 26-27 based on salaries, staffing levels is about $20 million, which is increased from $8 million, just a couple of years ago you see here. So the top line, the red line, are the checks we actually write to the pension system. PSERS, that's your $20 million. The state also does, as part of our revenue budget, they provide a 50% subsidy for all of those expenditures. So the gray line then on the bottom you can see is our net expense. So it is half of that. So we have a $10 million net expense there is the difference between the two. So again, when you go back just a few years, we were net expense of $4.1 million. We're net expense of $10 million. So that's a $5.9 million expense that has been shifted onto school districts and ultimately our local tax base for the cost of PSERS. Now, I will note that the PSERS employer rate, so we have no control over the employer rate. The state or PSERS sets that through their processes, is slightly reduced from this year. So we're at 34%. The rate is 33.59%. But basically what that means is for every $100 in wages, we pay $33.59 into the retirement system. So it's a major cost consideration. This here is then just that employer rate. So this shows you the trend of the employer rate over time. There really is no anticipated let up in that rate. So you can see the green highlighted areas it says 34, but we're just showing whole numbers there. So 33.59. You can see it trends up to a little over 37%. So that's going to be an expense that all school districts are going to be facing for the foreseeable future. It does eventually, it is projected to drop off, but we don't know when that's going to be at this point as the PSERS liability becomes fully funded. So this then gives you a sense of, yes, we have received additional funds from the state over time here. But what this chart really shows you then, it gives you a sense of what the district cost increases have been for just our PSERS expense line item compared to the total revenue increases from the state here. So you can see red bars, PSERS cost increase. The gray bars are the actual total state revenue increases to the district here. And you can see over this time period that the total state revenue increases have not even kept up with the PSERS cost increases here. So we've seen about a $1.5 million over this time period shifted onto local tax base just from PSERS costs compared to total state revenue. So again, just something important to keep in mind as we talk about state revenue increases. So we do participate. Healthcare is another huge impact for the district, our cost of healthcare. We participate in a healthcare consortium with 10 other school districts, the Bucks and Montgomery Healthcare Consortium. These charts give you a sense of what we've seen over time as far as expense costs. So the top chart are actual costs over time. And then the bottom chart is the percentage increases. So medical and prescription are part of that consortium. Those are the two major. You can see medical is the largest part of our cost there, but prescription is not insignificant. We've been seeing prescription costs actually increase at a greater rate than our medical costs are. But you can see in the consortium, we've done fairly well over time to stay sort of at or below that 8% trend. So our consortium uses an 8% trend as they forecast future rates. Our increase for next year is just around that 8% mark. We also went through some plan changes in the consortium, but all in all, things are stable there, but it's something that Ms. Kitten and I will look at very closely on a regular basis, just as we watch trends and costs. Costs are becoming a huge driver. Some other school districts are seeing increases at significantly higher rates than 8% as they look at their claims driving costs to a much higher level. So we will continue to watch that, but we have 8% in for next year and 8% in for our future projections. So special education costs we've talked about. Again, it's another major driver of our cost increase when we look at our budget here. So this just gives you a sense of special education costs over time, looking back approximately 10 years here. And you can see really the significant increase in costs that we've seen over the last 6 years here. And when you look at the cost drivers there specifically, not new information, we've been talking about this year, but educational assistance, we've needed 11 new educational assistants this year to support our students in special education programs and services. They were new and incremental to even our budget that we approved last year. They are now built into our budget for next year, so that's driving a pretty big cost increase. Out of district placements are driving our costs up by about $1.35 million. See, the largest increase there is the Montgomery County intermediate unit and our students receiving programs and services there. That is a small amount of cost increases. It is mostly new students that are receiving services there. So it's not like the MCIU is really causing that increase. It's really students that are requiring services through their programs here. Dr. Smith also mentioned early intervention. We are watching that the students coming out of those programs through evaluations very closely. We have 40 students that are in those programs today. Again, there are a number. Students can stay in that program, or parents can choose to keep their children in that program for an extra year if they decide to, but there are a number of kids that are in the extra year that will be coming into kindergarten next year. So really, we're just watching how many, what their needs are, and making sure we're planning appropriately for those students for next year. Also not new, but again, part of our total conversation here when we look at budget. Charter school is $1.1 million we have in our budget for next year. That's driven by we do pay a tuition rate. Every school district has their own calculated tuition rate for students that live within their school district bounds that go to charter schools. We this year budgeted for 32, so we budget based on students that are actually enrolled there based on invoices and enrollment forms that we receive from charter schools. This year we've seen a pretty significant increase, so we're at 50, which is plus 18 from what we've budgeted this year. So next year obviously we know the grades of the students that are in there, so we know some students are seniors that will be graduating. The chart on the bottom is not our current year enrollment, though, just to make sure you're not saying, well, there's not 4 there, so how are you getting that? The chart on the bottom reflects what the next year enrollment would be based on current year students that are there. So next year we would have 6 or 7 students, 6 students that'll be 12th graders next year in charter schools. The other thing to note here, and there's still discussion at the state level, is we did get school districts across the state did get relief this year from the state budget. So they did update the tuition calculation rate, which did drive tuition rates down. So this year we were budgeted at $20,000 for every student in regular education and $45,000 for every student receiving special education services. You can see what our projections are for next year. So regular ed's pretty similar, but special education, there was relief in how that cost was calculated. So cost could be up more, but that's kind of what's closing some of that gap. There is conversation about more of that happening into next year, so we'll monitor that with the state budget. Okay, this slide is a look at, again, a lot of the details of the work that our departments and buildings have done. So again, I'm not going to walk through every single line item here, but again, just to point out a couple of the big items when you look at comparisons year over year. Within the business office budget, I held the $1.4 million for the elementary furniture refresh project. So that's why you see a large decrease there, because that's obviously not in the budget for next year. Grants, you see a pretty significant reduction. Most of that is related to our PCCD grant, which comes through the state. We had, just because of the timing of usage of those funds, we actually receive it in a year, but you can spend them out through the next fiscal year. We had 2 years worth budgeted this year, but next year we only have 1 year budgeted just because of the timing of the usage of funds. So that's a revenue and expense item. They move up and down together. So it's really no benefit to the overall budget. Facilities is decreasing by a little bit, but within there, there's big moves, right? We have capital equipment. We had a couple large capital equipment items purchased this year. So we see a pretty significant reduction of $140,000. But when we look at our liability insurance across the district, we're seeing 10% increases in our budget from our insurance broker that we're working with across all line items in the budget for liability insurance. So that's adding about $65,000. In student services, we talked about all of the reasons there. So we're seeing about $1.5 million increase in our student services budget. And then in teaching and learning, just note a couple items here is that if you remember, this year's budget included the science refresh for our FOSS curriculum. Our teaching and learning department is currently working on an ELA curriculum renewal. So we do have built into the budget what we know as of today of the worst case scenario for the ELA curriculum budget in order to refresh that, which is about $500,000. The reduction of FOSS is also in there, so that offsets each other. But again, in May, I believe the Education Committee will be discussing that further. And we also believe there's probably additional savings that will come out of that because our worst case scenario is probably not where they'll end up here. So as we think about what else is changing as we move towards the end of the budget, that's probably one where we could see some significant reductions based on final decisions. And then these are your building budgets. Again, there's not much to mention here. The only thing of note is just the athletics department. We talked about some budgetary transfers this year for travel for our athletics teams that have been wildly successful over the last year or two, even before that, I'm sure. But this year, we're seeing pretty significant travel costs for those. So that's driving some expense. And then on the debt service line item, again, I think it's just important to mention. So our debt service structure for the high school was built out over a multi-year, 20 to 25 year period. This just reflects that change. There were no actual bond issues that were paid off this year, but based on the debt service structure, that's the reduction that we're seeing this year. That's sort of a one-time drop, and then we see only smaller decreases over time until we start to pay off some of those, which happens in the 29-30 fiscal year. That's also when we think about the millage drop-off, when we see the millage drop-off start to come into play as we have bond issues that are paid off. These are just a couple large items. Again, I always like to note large items that will eventually come before the board at the committee level or ultimately board, just so you're aware they'll be coming. So I mentioned the ELA curriculum. We also every year have the Chromebook refresh process. So that's what we have in the budget for the Chromebook refresh. And then our grounds department, again, has a 17-year-old. When we look at vehicle replacement plans, we have a 17-year-old dump truck that does need to be replaced. So that is currently in the budget for next year. So again, just some one-time bigger items that will be part of the discussion and planning process. All right, every year in the budget, we do utilize a budgetary reserve. So these are areas where we just, we set money aside for things either that we just don't know about or that, we don't know how much it will actually be, right? So we have always had about $700,000 in the budgetary reserve. That's still what it is this year, $700,000. $250,000 of that is just general things across the entire budget that were not planned for that could come up. I'll skip special education. Assessment appeals are related to, we have a number of open assessment appeals. Most of them were filed this year, which take effect next year. So anything that's open assessment appeal that was new this year, which was a high volume of them, which we've talked about already, will be in next year's budget. So even though they're open, when they're settled, they will actually be reductions in next year's revenue, not what this is. This reflects, we have 2 open appeals that go back to prior period, meaning this year. So if those are not closed by the end of this year and we don't close them until next year, that would actually show up as an expense in next year's budget because the property owner has paid the revenue. We will owe it back in a future period, so it actually gets reported as an expense. So just so you understand why that's there. If any of those would be closed out before the end of the year, that could be reduced. But again, I would recommend that we start to build up the special education contingency. It's something we've talked about and something you can see here. In prior years, the assessment appeal was a little higher and the special education was only at 200,000. Instead of reducing that budgetary reserve, we've kind of built up and given us a little more cushion in special education because we've seen so much happening there that is unplanned for costs. So that's why we still have 700,000. But again, this is an area in the event, this was sort of the first year, at least in my time here, that we've used almost all of that budgetary reserve. We've not historically had to tap into that. So in the event we wouldn't need to utilize these funds, it's just one reason to note that we could see $700,000 under budget. That'd be a large driver of why we might have an under budget next year or in future years. And I mentioned this, but this just gives you a sense, again, debt service is something, when you think about this, gives you the full idea of debt service over time here. You can see how debt has trended over time. You can see Sandy Run, the issuance of the debt to get us to the level we're at today. We'll start to see in the future the drop off of the high school electoral debt. Again, 2930 is when we start to see payoff of some of those tranches of debt. But this just gives you a sense over time of what's happening on the debt service side. This chart does not reflect the Jarretttown debt service. So we're still working through, obviously, the full project budget for Jarretttown. We know that if we need to borrow upwards of $45 million, that will be about $3 million. Once we start to finalize that and hone in on what a final budget looks like and what those the estimated debt service payments look like, we can start to add that to this chart. But this chart does not reflect the additional debt service for Jarretttown, and is why we continue to hold it in the projections for the transfer to the capital reserve fund. All right, and then our capital reserve fund, again, while not part of the general fund budget, I do like to mention it because we have a planned transfer in the general fund budget for the capital reserve fund. So it remains essential for us to really focus on funding our capital reserve for future project needs as much as we can. As I mentioned, we have $365 million of valued facilities that need to be maintained over time. And again, what we've been able to save over the last 5 or 6 years has really allowed us to get a lot of essential projects done without borrowing. We've been able to pay for a lot of that or almost all of it with cash here. So we've been earning some interest on that cash, paying for projects with cash. So that's been an essential part of our plan over time. We also know we have about $1.4 million of approved projects. Tonight, we talked about an additional, 600,000 or so, 500, 600,000 or so of additional projects for this summer. And then we have another $26 million of identified projects through 2030 from the plan that we presented in January. So there's lots of things that we need to be planning for here to keep our facilities up, to provide the educational environment that we want our students and teachers to have. So this then kind of puts it all together. Again, I mentioned that total deficit, but you can see revenues a little over 127 million, expenditures 128.6 million. What's different this year than we've seen in the past couple of years is that if you look at that expenditure item on there, the 128.6, that does not include the transfer. So that would say for operations what it costs us to run our district. This is the first year now in at least my last couple of years, we have a $1.2 million deficit just on that. Like, revenues are not sufficient to cover what our operational expenses are. And then we also have the planned transfer of $3 million. Again, that's there, and I feel it's important to be there because I don't want to lose track of that becomes real in 3 years in order to pay for Jarretttown. So our beginning fund balance, 9.6 million, ending fund balance is 5.3. That's 4.1 of budgeted expenditures as our unassigned fund balance, which is low. And I note that and I pause there just to make sure that is budget to budget, right? So if you think about our current year budget has a $3.5 million deficit. We're not planning on ending the year with a $3.5 million deficit, right? We talked about tonight, it was about $660,000 or $640,000. So when you think about that, if we close the year where we're at today, based on our projections, that would add about $3 million back into our unassigned fund balance, still allowing us to transfer money to the capital reserve. So that increases that 4.1%. We also will have discussions around, we have a committed fund balance of $1.4 million for the elementary furniture refresh. That project will be done as of the end of the year. So we'll have to talk about then what happens with that $1.4 million. Minimally, we would uncommit it because that project is done and it would move back into the unassigned fund balance, again, pushing that up. So between those two items, again, this reflects budget to budget, but if we can put $4.4 million back into our unassigned fund balance, that takes that back up to about 7.3%. So not trying to make things seem better because we've got a lot of work to do here, but 4.1% is very low and I wouldn't be comfortable at that number, but there's ways that we have to kind of push that back up. And we've also got a bit of a runway, as I explained, to close this gap over the next 3 years. So again, summary, high-level items. This just puts into perspective. I won't walk through all of it, but again, it puts into perspective from a revenue side. We're generating about 3.2% in equivalent of new revenue, even though we have a 3.5% tax increase built into the budget. That's largely because of the revenue that we're losing from the impact of assessment appeals. And then you can see all the other major items that are driving on the expense side. We would need about a 4.6% tax increase to fully fund all of the expense increases. So the net effect of that is about $1.3 million, or the equivalent of a 1.5% tax increase. Again, just to kind of keep in perspective where we're at a high level. Okay, so protecting the future, again, I've mentioned this a couple times. This is the same chart you saw earlier, but again, we need to make sure we're bringing ultimately that blue line and the gray line back in line with each other. So you can see next year, $4.2 million deficit, 1.2 is between the red and the gray, but out to 3031, that's increasing to $5.7 million. So again, this is not something that is imminent. It's not next year. We have time, but we need to make sure, like I mentioned, that we're thinking about the next 5 years and how we can start to close that gap and bring it together. And we still have work to do this year as well. So I don't want to just make this a future conversation. So what's still open? Dr. Smith talked about all the work we still have to do on staffing, right? So we've still got a lot of work to do on staffing. That's 72% of our budget. So anything we can save there does drive out costs. We are closely watching special education and especially programs and compliance-related items with staffing, the number of students coming into kindergarten next year from early intervention. So we're monitoring all that. The ELA curriculum item, I do note on here, this is a best case scenario number. So just to kind of give you a sense, there's potential for $250,000 to come out of the budget as that's finalized. One example of that is when you think about the middle school level curriculum work that they're doing, there's two, I believe, that are being evaluated. One is significantly higher cost than the other. So if we land on the lower cost one, as an example, that would come out of the budget. There's also some software packages that are being evaluated as we decide what the final ELA product is for next year. Charter school enrollment tuition, we'll monitor that. And then the capital reserve fund transfer is something that we could adjust if we wanted to. And then we talked about all the revenue items last month, but all items that will adjust over time as we gather more information. So where we're at right now, we have a stable, I would say we're in a stable financial position with a negative trend, right? So we have sufficient funds. We've got a structurally unbalanced budget, both from an operational standpoint and from a total standpoint. $1.2 million operational deficit, $4.2 million total deficit that we're working on. We've also got $3 million plan transfer to the capital reserve fund and $700,000 in budgetary reserves. So again, that's some of the flexibility. And we've also got all of these other things going on, right? There's economic uncertainty. There's uncertainty around interest rates, although they've been a little bit stable. I think there's still pressure for those rates to come down over time. We budget at 3%. Those are the rates that the Fed funds rate currently 3.5 to 3.75. We earn slightly below that right now. So every 1% change is about $600,000 there. And then funding for the future and monitoring fund balance, we'll continue to work through that over the next couple of presentations. And this last slide is just, I note the resources. I did mention the budget narrative. Everyone's seen it. It's in the agenda. Certainly check that out if you're listening online or any of our board members here. There's lots of information in that document. That document is draft for now, right? So it reflects where we're at today, and it will continue to be updated through our final budget, and then a final version of that will be released. So that is the current version of where we're at with the budget, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Questions or comments on the presentation? Go ahead, John.
Yeah, let me maybe start with a question on the building budgets. So you may have mentioned, did we start reflecting it differently? Did we extract something from the building budgets this year that normally is reflected in there? Because they looked, at least for the elementary schools, they looked a decent amount less than prior years. So I didn't know if, and again, maybe I was searching for the prior year while you said it, but you're smiling, so
That's such a great pickup. I mean, that's,
thank you.
Yes, it really is. Yes, we did make some adjustments. So and the teaching and learning side wasn't probably as easy to see, but we did make some adjustments with the elementary budget specifically. So we worked very closely internally. We did actually utilize more of a per student type allocation there in order to figure that out, but it didn't reduce their budget. We pulled a lot of things when we made that change out of the budget. For example, like software packages, we moved that out of the elementary budgets into the teaching and learning budget in order to get to a more apples to apples kind of student allocation. So yes, these are normalized from last year, so they won't match last year's numbers for that reason. Yep. That's a great pickup.
Thank you. So the other question I have, you can stick on this slide, is I did also go back and look, and I think this is the first year. I think if you go back maybe to 23, we used to lump the athletics budget together with the high school budget, and then starting in 24, we separated them. And this is the first year the athletics budget is actually higher than the high school budget. And I'm a big supporter of athletics, don't get me wrong. Nobody hear me say I don't like athletics, but it is a pretty staggering increase year over year. And I know we talked about some of the travel, but are there other things contributing to that? It's just, yeah.
Those are the main items, right? When you look at $31,000, we have $15,000 in travel. The athletic trainer is a piece of that, right? So we contract that out with NovaCare. So there's a small increase there. Software fees, I mean, the one thing in software fees that I suppose we could have more conversation about, but our arbiter pay is we currently write checks to every referee that comes and refs a game. We write manual checks, we follow up on them, we do all this work out of the high school. We are evaluating arbiter pay. It's more of an electronic resource in order to make those payments. So that is part of the software fee increase that's in there, in order to streamline that process. So there's conversation there, but yeah, most of that is travel related costs.
Yeah, I mean, one of my, I think just an area to focus on in the travel area, because, you know, some of the numbers that came in, and again, like you said, it's a great thing that we have to travel because that means our teams are doing great. But yeah, I think some of the travel costs as we got later into the season started to get high, and there may be reasons for that. So I would just, you know, if that means we need to be booking earlier, you know, with cancellation policies and all that good stuff, there were some numbers late in the season that were up there. So But yeah, I just noticed it's the first year it actually exceeded, and I know you mentioned you took some things out, but it is higher than the high school budget. So it's staggering.
We didn't actually take anything out of the high school budget, so this was Dr. Ortiz was diligent in the creation of his budget in order to meet sort of that or get close to that 1% reduction, but we're still working on all those. Yeah, but yes.
And then the only other question I had for now, because I know we're still monitoring enrollment, I don't know how long, I didn't go back and look, how long our class size numbers have been in place. Have we, is it worth doing sort of a comparison to other districts or, get a recommendation on whether they still make sense, higher or lower? I mean, it just occurs to me, I don't know that we've really had, at least since I've been on the board, a real substantive conversation about class size. And maybe that's because the recommendations haven't changed, the needs haven't changed, but it did strike me that it's based on the assumption that we're just going to keep these class sizes the same. And I don't know whether that's where they should be, candidly, not being an educator.
It looks to me like when I pull up the class size policy 126, it says last revised in 2020. So it hasn't probably come back to the board in the 5 or 6 years. I can just say from my experience, the class size numbers are pretty comparable when I've compared that in my past roles across the county. We could do that again to see where they're at. But I would say they're pretty comparable to what my experience has been.
Other comments or questions? Mary Beth, yeah.
I was curious about the kindergarten enrollment and if we're kind of in a similar spot numbers-wise to this time last year or previous years.
Yeah, good question. We're pretty similar to where we've been at in the last couple of years. Fort Washington seems to have the larger numbers and be kind of out in the front early with registrations. Thomas Fitz is usually more. We see in the summer, we see some more of their enrollments coming in. We are working within the community of Thomas Fitz to try to promote more, to try to get earlier registrations. We now have the Ready, Set, Soar program that we're hoping will also encourage people to register early. But yeah, I would say they're pretty comparable to where they've been in past years at this particular time. And we have a spreadsheet of probably the past 6 years or so that we've collected to kind of watch how they've grown each month so that we can project each month how much we think we're going to continue to grow. Yeah.
And then with the increase in need for AS teachers, are we certain that those 10 kids need an autistic support classroom and not itinerant autistic support, or is it just kind of a ballpark?
So Dr. Lank would probably be able to answer that more specifically, but I do believe that she feels based upon the level of programming that they currently have that they're going to need more of a significant programming. This is always a difficult one to project though, and for families to decide if they're going to enroll and come into kindergarten or not. So I know she's continuing to carefully watch that. I'm hoping to have more information for the briefing this week so that that's something that we can seriously consider if we need it, because we know it will be a hard to fill position. So we would like to get out early if it's one that we're going to need.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for covering that. I was going to cover the get out early on, especially that one, but all of those difficult to fill positions. I know it's hard to predict whether we'll need it, but in the past we have, as a board, authorized advertising without knowing for sure. And I suspect we'd be willing to do that again, but we can see where the numbers trend. But I think I would certainly be in support of getting out early for those hard to fill positions.
So I would say if the board is comfortable, ideally for the autistic support position, and I can provide more information in the briefing if that is helpful, but if you're comfortable, I know Mrs. Kitten and I would, it's actually an ad of a position. So you technically would need to create the position before we would post it. So if you're in favor, we can put that on the legislative agenda for Monday, the 27th to create the position, which would allow us to then post it. Doesn't mean it's filled. It's not actually filled in part of the budget until we would fill it or the budget would be approved, but we could start that process if you're comfortable with that. We've done that the last 2 years with some positions that we've known early enough.
Right. So it's something to consider on Monday night for that, or next Monday night for that question. Yeah.
Right. But I would need to know by this Friday when we create the agenda if I should put it on the agenda or not. So maybe if you want to think about it, and maybe leadership, you can poll the group if we want to add it as an
Yeah,
agenda.
or we can.
Or we can put it on and then you could table it,
Yeah,
whatever.
Yeah, all right. We will figure that out, not right here tonight, I suspect. I had a question about, we had discussed in the past the rise in charter school enrollment and making some attempt to determine what might be behind that. Do we have anything to report?
Yes. So two things are happening. There are new requirements for us to check residency of charter school students. And so that has prompted a process internally that we have put in place that will now also include when we receive a request for transfer of records to a charter school, or a family reaches out to say, I'm thinking of going, that the buildings will be having conversations to learn more before the child leaves us and see if there is programming we can provide or work through something. So that's one piece. The second piece is when we sent out the forms that we were required to do residency verification, in our letter we included a survey to see if we could get families to complete it, to tell us why they left and would they be interested in coming back if we could offer something comparable. In my experience of doing this before, you get very little return rate on that and not much information. Most people are not interested in returning. I was pleasantly surprised. Our return rate was really good. I don't know the percentage off the top of my head, although I can look. And the bulk of the people that responded indicated they would be interested in learning more and considering returning to the district if we were able to offer a comparable virtual option. So that is something that I believe we need to investigate. I don't think it's something we can have done and prepared for the board to start next school year, but certainly by mid-year, I think we could be able to present to you, here's what it would be, here's potential savings, here's potential costs, because there'd be some oversight to it, and then consider, is it something we would want to create moving forward? So I do think we have some options. Ideally, we would stop people from leaving us because we'd have an option. If we could get some of them back, that would be an added bonus. Yes. So I think we have some thoughts for how to do that.
All right, thank you. All right, other comments or questions? Joe?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Mark. I had a similar one as well. So the 46 students that we've anticipated for 26, 27, I think I know the answer to this now after Dr. Smith, your response, but is that assuming any efforts at bringing the students back into brick and mortar are unsuccessful?
That is just a complete rollover of the current students that are there. So
Okay.
we're hoping that's worst case scenario.
Right.
If at some point we can bring students back, then that would reduce, yeah.
Okay. And the 11 educational assistants, the staff that were added during 25, 26 to support the students, I think the special ed positions, that weren't anticipated, obviously. Is there, I mean, aside from just increasing the special ed contingency fund that Andy talked about, is there any kind of projection process that can put into place to better anticipate those changes year over year? That's a big number, obviously. I mean,
It
how
is
do we
big.
how do we know that that's not going to happen again?
It is a really good question, Dr. Berto. I think for us, we were, I would say, surprised that we needed to add those. Many of them were from new enrollments that they weren't even our students to start the year. And so we didn't anticipate what they were coming to us with. It might have been in their IEP already, or after their transition, we learned they needed greater support. Some of them were maybe due to programmatic change or behaviors have escalated during the year, and we tried other interventions and needed to have that level of support. It's really hard to predict. Do we want to put more in a contingency fund so that we have it there? We can do that, but then that will make our gap even more. Or do we wait and see what happens because we don't know, and then we haven't added money that maybe we don't need? I think we could take either approach. I don't know, Mr. Leckman, if you have a preference. I don't want to speak for you, so.
That was a fine answer. So, and I think it's the work we're doing around early intervention too, right? Like I think that's an important evaluation. There's only so much we can learn about students in early intervention. So I know Dr. Lanka is doing a great job to try and get further out in front of that and understand what those needs might look like as well.
So how does that 11 compare to previous years?
I couldn't tell you the exact number. Maybe Mr. Leckman can. It's more. It's definitely more than what we've had in previous years.
We've not seen anything like this in my time here. Yeah.
Wendy?
Yeah, along this same vein, I think I just need some clarifying questions on special ed. You said the classrooms currently are all at Fort Washington. We had 3 classrooms are all at Fort Washington.
The 3 autistic support classrooms that are district classrooms, which means students from any of the 4 elementaries can go there if they meet the criteria for that level of programming, are all currently housed at Fort Washington.
And are any of those students, I don't know exactly the right term, but mainstreamed or part of the day, are they in?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Some are out in the general education classrooms. They might have assistants with them. Some are back in the autistic support classroom. It really depends upon their particular programming and their level of need. So there's a whole spectrum and a combination of out maybe for all of my classes, but I need some support in the autistic room, to I might be in the autistic support classroom for the bulk of my day.
And does that mean most of those students then are in Fort Washington student population? Or
Not necessarily.
Not
They
necessarily.
could be any of the 4 elementary schools. If they've met the criteria for that level of programming, they could be a Maple Glen student as their school of residence, but they attend Fort Washington because they're part of the autistic support program.
Okay.
Similar to, like, we have a life skills program is housed at Jarretttown, so any life skills elementary can go there. We house the MCIU program at Maple Glen, so any of our students that qualify for that could go there. If we create this 4th autistic support, it most likely would not be at Fort Washington, but we haven't made decisions at which elementary school it would be. We have to look at space. We need to look at what programming and resources. Part of putting everything at Fort Washington was we were able to really maximize some of the shared resources that they need, but it adds a strain to a school building when you have that level of programming. Your principals are needed in a lot more. You have a lot more support staff that are needed there. So I think we recognize that we would probably need to think about a different school for that.
And I'm also thinking about Jarretttown, it's built out for more student body. Maybe there'd be more space there for this. That's a continuing need for the district.
Correct. If you think about those plans that were up on the screen earlier, part of our initial planning when we talked about the number of special education classrooms, there is 1 flex classroom in that building intended for special education, whether it needed to be a 4th learning support classroom or the forward thinking was we probably will need another autistic support. So there is space there in that building should we choose to put it there when the new building is there.
Any projections on, just because I live this, the increase in speech and OT needs for those kids?
For that particular population, I'd have to ask Dr. Lank. We haven't talked about that particularly for them. She has indicated, and I know I didn't put it on the slides tonight, we're still evaluating the need for additional occupational therapy support. There is a desire to be able to increase Tier 1 push-in support for OT before students need to be evaluated and qualify for OT. And in order to do that, as well as have some Tier 2 interventions before students are evaluated, it would require some additional staffing in terms of OT. So we are analyzing that right now to see where does it fall on our priority list, if now is the time to move forward with that, or if we need to continue with the staffing we have and see what adjustments we can make. Yeah.
Other comments or questions? Okay. Thank you for the budget update. No action to take on that. We'll look forward to future updates in both on our board briefs and, of course, at the next Finance Committee meeting. Take the next 2 together, or are they separate? Yeah.
Yeah, so the next 2 are not related, but they're both related to legal services that we receive. So again, we currently utilize Whistler Pearlstein as our district solicitor. Our current proposal with them has rates that extend through the end of this fiscal year. So you can see the memo from Mr. Diazio in order to provide us a rate projection for the next 3 years with the district. So again, we're not currently exploring other options, but I want to make it clear while this is a 3-year rate projection, it's not necessarily a 3-year lock-in agreement. So it's just to kind of get us a sense for rates for the next 3 years. I think we're very happy with the services that Whistler Pearlstein is providing to us. So the recommendation is to accept this proposal and continue to move forward with Whistler at this time. And then the second one is an annual pool council for both legal services and technology services. There is a technology component. We have continued to utilize this in the past. It includes consultation for both special education and technology related to items technology and special education items across the county. So we collaborate with districts across the county and beyond for these services. Sweet Stephen Katz and Williams is the one who provides these services. We get access to emails that keep us updated on relevant items that are going on in both of those areas. We also do have access to 10 full-day face-to-face consultations, file reviews for special education, or training sessions. So I think we found this to be an extremely valuable agreement on an annual basis. The cost of that is $15,750, which is no increase from the current year. So the recommendation is to move forward with both of those items.
All right, any comments or questions on either of these two? All right, we'll move those forward? Yes. All right, thanks. We've got, we'll take the next three together, I suppose.
I do have them together. So there's 3 separate sections for settlement stipulations here based on open assessment appeals. So NOMP, N is a recommendation to approve a property owner commercial appeal for 2026. That results in a tax loss of a little over $30,000. Item O, you can see I started to put a couple of these together since we're receiving multiple of them. So item O are property owner residential appeals for 2026. There are 3 of them. Our recommendation is to move forward with those. Those each include minor tax losses per the table that's in the agenda. And then item P are district initiated appeals. So there are 3 district appeals that we're looking to settle for 2026. Those result in actually some pretty significant tax gains, close to $10,000 for each of those. So they are all recommended for approval.
All right, comments or questions on any of the assessment items? All right, we'll move those forward? Yes. Yes. All right, thank you. And we'll take items Q and R together.
Yes, we will. These are an annual highlight item that we appreciate both from Giant and from all of our generous donors that shop at Giant and align their donation there to Upper Dublin School District. So our food service department receives another very generous donation through a program run by Giant Supermarkets. It's the total donation is $3,692.12. It's through Giant Supermarkets Feeding School Kids Initiative, where customers round up their grocery purchase to the nearest dollar, convert that choice points into a donation to this program. So again, like I mentioned, thank you to Giant, but certainly more importantly, thank you to all of our all the folks that shop there and have donated this money towards the school district. I will note that in addition, Giant also delivered a second check to us. They weren't very clear. It's from a prior year that we never received, but that was an additional $1,413.81 for this similar program. So again, when you put both of those together, that's the recommended amount on tonight. So the recommendation is that we, or the process is that we need to receive them, accept the donation per our process into the general fund, and then the second item is we need an actual formal board motion to transfer those funds into the food service fund, because that is ultimately the place where those funds were donated to support.
Any comments or questions on this donation or the transfer for it? All right, and as Andy said, certainly a big thank you to all the people who participated in that program and for Giant for providing the program so that people could participate in it. We'll move that one ahead, or these two ahead? Yes, all right, thank you. And we are up to public participation. If anyone would like to address the committee, please come to the mic, state your name and your city of residence, or affirm that you're a resident or taxpayer in the district before addressing the committee. Brooke will time your 4 minutes.
Hi, Jenny Vitella, Ambler. So, Jenna and Mary Beth, thank you so much for bringing up the basketball seating. And Joe, I literally think that one of the reasons to build this building was to have bigger basketball and cafeteria space. And if the community cannot use it, and the community can use it, if Upper Dublin Junior Athletic Association, that it's not standard or there's no seating for the community, there's no point. You have to comply. You're not, it's like no one's listening. That is one of the driving factors of making that space, community space. It's our tax money and the kids should be able to play there. UDJA, huge program, should be able to use it. There should be bleachers. So please work on that. Also, I noticed that the cafeteria is next to the gym, which is good for bingo night, right? But there's a wall in between for storage. So it seems like it should be maybe withdrawn so that you could maybe combine those rooms in a better, more cohesive way, kind of like I guess Fort Washington does in a way. And this all comes to my same question, which I've already asked, why, unlike Sandy Run, why was there no RFP for the architect? Why was ICS picking the architect that's someone we've not used before? And, again, Sandy Run was one of the healthiest conversations we had when we had multiple architects with multiple drawings, and the community got to pick, the board got to pick, and it was just a great conversation. And it seems to be the way it is, this drawing of this building, and it's not, two of the big focus areas for the community are not to mention the location of the property is really hurtful to the community, but to have these two spaces not be adequate for what the community wants and asks for is really disheartening. Jenna, thank you for bringing up the lights in the gym. Yeah, they turned them down for Carnation Ball. We want them down for post-prom. And I was hopeful that we'd have a dimming option. Maybe there's an on and off option that is partially sectioned off, but Mr. Lester has left, so that is a question I still have for him. We'll be able to keep one light on and turn off the other 25, or how is that possible with our old system? Again, I feel like it's another piecemeal job. We're changing all the lights, but we're not changing the wiring. Frustrating. And the logo. So I'm not sure why we're using an architect firm to do a logo instead of a graphic designer, but I'm just a CPA. I don't know about these things. But I do know that the Jarrowtown logo is actually Upper Dublin colors. It's red and black, right? And it is in a vector file. It's used by the PTO. They probably have all those graphics and all the color indicators on it. And I'm sure that we could get that to you to work with. I hate to have any of these logos change. Which also brings me to the inspiring learners, cap and gown person, whatever. I noticed that, it looks kind of like clip art or something. It doesn't even look like it's done by a graphic designer. And it has no indication of Upper Dublin or a cardinal in it at all. And I'm not sure what the use is of that new kind of logo we're using. What that purpose is, I'm not sure I understand, because it doesn't feel like it ties into Upper Dublin School District or the schools. And the budget for the athletics is so much more than that because of all the boosters and all the money they are forced to raise in order to cover costs that aren't, and all the work that volunteers and parent volunteers go into that. And also in the high school, what's also not listed in there, and it used to be at one point, the Upper Dublin High School Activity Fund. All us parents, we pay for those kids to go to Carnation Ball. We pay for those kids to go to Florida. We pay in for the prom, and it goes into some big fund, and I don't know how it's spent. But I think there's a decent amount of money in there that is also taxpayer parent money that goes in there. So thank you.
Anita Brister, Fort Washington. I want to also thank the board members who asked good questions tonight, because Jenny and I were back there thinking they're not really going to build a new school with no place for people to sit in the large gym. And you asked about bleachers, and we were very relieved. A lot of work goes into these meetings, and I know for Jenny, and especially for me too, we have I still end up having a lot of questions, but that's okay. And I commend that it's very well organized, and I appreciate the job that you do, Mr. Leckman. But I'm going to ask you, and obviously I'm not your boss, but I'm going to ask you if you just would think about some additional information for the next budget meeting, which you've done in the past. And that is, I'm used to this because I'm old. I was on the board in 1999 to 2003. That's how old I am. But for a good, I'm not exaggerating, a good 25, 30 years, well, at least 25, I'm going to say, through multiple superintendents, it was always part of a budget process, and it might have been that people did it in April or May, that we would see comparisons to other districts. And you are well aware that Monco does a comparison of all the budget categories, okay? Everything from how administration compares to salaries to other things. But the three that's always stood out in my mind that board members should be aware, and I think as a community member, I want to be aware, is how does our per pupil spending compare to the others in our county, the other districts in our county? How does our millage, obviously, and taxes compare to the others? We all know, I think, that Cheltenham has the highest taxes and has for a while. But I have watched Upper Dublin go from being to the middle and even below the middle on taxes to about fourth highest. So I think it's important to look at those charts. And I guess another thing is our per pupil spending and our debt. Those are the three that I think are most important, but there are other budget categories that you could compare to once the IU data is available. So I just would love to see that in June, assuming I'm here. Question, just a basic question, it might be more for Dr. Smith. Do we have the same number of administrators planned for next year as this year? If not, what's the change? If you know offhand, which I would think you probably would, how many administrators is that? I'm hoping, I guess I could get this by a right to know request, but I'm quite honestly losing track of the capital reserve. I know you covered what's in there now, but is it possible to get a capital reserve summary, like a 5-year summary of what you, and again, you've had that in some past budget documents where you show us how much went in for the last few years. If it's something you'll show in June, that'd be great. If not, I'll put in a right to know because I'm losing track of how, I know you talk about 3 million tonight, but I want to know how much has gone in for the last like 30, not 30 years, but maybe 5 years. What else? Okay, not related to budget, but I think it's really kind of important, and I think this is for any topic, right? I'm totally confused about the problem, which I guess will be brought up at next week's legislative meeting, doing away with the North Hills after-school program. The only thing I've been able to find as a rationale was something to do with test. So I'm not asking for a long explanation tonight. It doesn't even make sense to me whether the test of the kids that go there are great or if they're not great. If the parents are saying this program benefits our children, and I was at one meeting where a lot of parent after parent spoke, I'm confused. Like if there's some explanation, I'd love to know what it is, but I'm in favor of keeping that. It's a relatively small amount in the budget. It's been around a long time. It gives those kids a place to go and get homework help. I see it as a positive, and I'm totally confused as to why suddenly this year it has to come out of the budget, and I don't think it should.
Okay, seeing nobody else coming up to the mic, we'll close this opportunity for public participation. There were no comments submitted through the online form. I will just look around the table. Does anybody have any immediate responses? Dr. Smith.
I'll just comment on a couple of things. We did significantly investigate a combination of the gym and the cafeteria at Jarretttown, even to the point of visiting other schools that have that in place, and made a purposeful decision that having a movable door created more issues, more sound issues. Again, we visited other schools to see that it was absolutely something that we did consider. The logo, the Alloy 5, the department that will be working on the logo, is graphic designers. So we're not working with architects to create a particular logo. And while I recognize that the PTO has a Jarretttown dragon, that is not necessarily the same dragon that the school uses. So there's lots of pieces with that. And our number of administrators from 25-26 to 26-27 would be status quo.
All right, thanks. Anyone else? Go ahead.
The only thing I'll add, and I can certainly follow up with Ms. Brister after the meeting, is the capital reserve information that she's looking for is in the budget narrative. So that budget narrative does have a capital reserve, and I think that's important for our finance committee and board to be aware of as well. It gives past trends. It has information about what's been transferred in. It has information on what categories we've spent on. So that budget narrative document there's lots of information in there. That's one of them. The other thing I'll mention is millage and taxes was part of our revenue presentation last month. So certainly, you can check that out. And the other thing I just want to mention on the activity fund, I think the comment was that there's taxpayer funds in student activity funds. I want to clarify that there are no taxpayer funds from the district that exist in student activity funds. All those funds are club and organization based at the high school. Certainly it may come from folks that live in the community, but it goes from them directly into the student activity fund. So I think those are the items that I have.
All right, thanks. Anyone else? Okay. I will announce our next finance committee will be Wednesday, May 13th at 6 p.m. And I'll take the opportunity to announce the following month, the June meeting will be Monday, June 15th at 6 p.m. Again, that's a Monday. That one has been moved and then moved again. So check your calendars for that one to make sure you've got it right. And with that, we are adjourned.